Hey guys, I'm Avish. This is the 17th video of .NET MAUI with Syncfusion Control series. Let's quickly review our previous session before we get started. In the previous session, we mostly learned about Syncfusion Calendar Control and gained an understanding of the various features in comparison with the scheduler control. Additionally, we have customized the calendar control and implemented range selection, navigation, and customizations. We have also focused on the remaining layout controls and gained knowledge of pop-up control by utilizing it to confirm appointments. We have also used accordion and expander controls to expand and collapse Dr. Aaron's biodetails page. Except for the text input layout control, we have covered practically every layout control. Before moving on, I advise you to understand the prior sessions. We have previously covered the layout, calendar editors, and grid controls. Now we will move on to the Syncfusion text input layout control and button control components. Text input layout or label entry is a container control that allows users to add floating labels, password toggle icons to show or hide passwords, leading and trailing icons, and assistive labels such as error messages and help text on top of input controls. The text input layout is designed to enhance the functionality and user experience of text input fields in your application. Some of the key features typically include a floating label where the label moves up and floats above the input field when the user focuses on the text input, providing better visibility of the label and input content. We can set a hint text which provides a brief description or example of the expected input format or content for the text field. This hint text can help guide users when entering data. The text input layout supports error validation, allowing you to indicate input errors or validation messages to users, ensuring they are aware of any issues with their input and can take corrective action. You can provide helper text which gives additional information or guidance to users for filling out the input field, helping them understand the expected input format or requirements. Some implementations of the text input layout may support input masking, which allows you to specify a format for the input data such as phone numbers or dates, ensuring that users' input data is in the required format. Syncfusion button components offer customizations to buttons, checkboxes, radio buttons, and segmentation. User can set icons, background images, and customize appearance for different visual states using the Visual State Manager. Some key features of Syncfusion button control includes text and icon support, which allows you to set text content as well as icons, providing flexibility in design of your buttons. You can customize the appearance of the button by applying different styles and themes. This includes options to change the background color, text color, border, and more. Along with these features, Syncfusion button component supports command support, click events and event handlers, rounded corners and border configuration, content alignment, and animation support. Syncfusion checkbox is a selection control that allows users to select one or more options from a list of predefined choices. A checkbox has three selection states: selected, unselected, and indeterminate. Use the indeterminate state when a collection of sub-choices has both unselected and selected states. Syncfusion checkbox control can have parent and child relationship with other checkboxes. Chips is a feature-rich control that presents information in an interactive and customizable layout. It arranges multiple chips in a layout and groups them to make selection easy. Chips can be interactive elements, allowing users to interact with them, such as selecting or deselecting them depending on the specific use case. Chips control support filtering and selection features, allowing users to filter content to make selections based on the chips displayed. You can customize the appearance of the chips by adjusting various properties such as background color, text color, border, and more, ensuring that the chips align with your application's visual design. Chips can be further categorized as input chips, action chips, choice chips, and filter chips. The segmented control offers choices from a linear set of segments containing text, icons, or both. Each segment following as a discrete button to select options. The segmented control is one of the UI components offered by Syncfusion, which allows users to select options from a set of mutually exclusive choices. The segmented control elegantly displays text, images, or a combinations of text and image in a modern design. You can customize the appearance of individual segments, including the text, background, border, and other visual aspects to match the design language of your application. The segmented control often provides a selection indicator which highlights the currently selected segment, making it visually clear to users which option is active. Syncfusion provides radio button under button components. Radio button control is a selection control that allows users to select one option from a list of predefined choices, and we can customize the radio buttons with states and formatting. Let's now switch to the coding session and get going. In the previous sessions, which is session 4, 5 and 6, we have used the Syncfusion data form control to build the employee personal information page. Data form control is a pretty useful control that can build simple data form pages for sign up, login and other employee information. However, the data form item and the data form group item expects its own data form text item controls or data form switch item controls or data form masked item controls, and it doesn't allow us to embed any of the other controls such as Syncfusion buttons, Syncfusion segmented controls or checkboxes within the data form group items. And hence, if we need to build a data form similar to the employee personal information page, we cannot use the Syncfusion data form control. Instead, we will be using the Syncfusion's input layout control, and I will also be using the accordion control to support the expand and collapse of the subsections for the personal information page. Let's now create a new XAML file to incorporate the input form control. Before creating the XAML file, right click on the project, manage NuGet packages, switch to the updates over here, and notice that I have upgraded all the packages related to the Syncfusion from 22.2.5 to 23.1.6. The simple reason is Syncfusion MAUI buttons is released in 23.1.36, and hence the minimum version required for Syncfusion MAUI buttons is 23.1.36. I recommend you to upgrade all the packages to match the version and get the community license by contacting the Syncfusion team. Now if you observe here, I have also added rest of the controls such as Syncfusion buttons, Syncfusion inputs and Syncfusion expander package. Let me switch back to the Solution Explorer, and under the view, let me create a file for employee information. Right click on the view, add new item, choose .NET MAUI, and under this choose content page as XAML, and then let's create employee view.xaml file. Let me switch to the Syncfusion MAUI toolbox. Let me add a Syncfusion accordion control. Remove this label over here, drag and drop the Syncfusion accordion control. Let me add some padding to this grid and change the label text accordion header to name, and let's add the vertical text alignment equal to center, and then let me remove the grid and label under the content of the accordion item, and instead let me create a vertical stack layout. Let me add some padding to this vertical stack layout as well. Let's start by creating the first name and last name as the options for employee form. Within the vertical stack layout under the accordion content item, let me drag and drop SF text input layout. Let me scroll down to find that. Here it is. Let me pull and drag and drop this SF text input layout. Now instead of core, I will rename it as input layout. Notice that we do have an entry as a component under SF layout, which is nothing but the text input entry. And you do have a hint over here called name. Let me change this to first name. Let me also add a helper text. Call it as enter your first name. Let me give a height request of 80. There is already a height request of 80, so let me remove this one. Let's save this. Let me add another SF input layout for last name. So let me change this as last name. Enter your last name, and the hint is already last name. Let's quickly restart the application and look at the output. Before starting the application, let me switch to appsshell.xaml file, copy this flyout item, paste it over here. Instead of personal information, let me choose from the calendar so it's easy. Instead of calendar view, I will change it as employee view, and route will be employee view with title as employee view. Let me change it over here in the flyout item title as well. It shows up on the hamburger menu. Let's start the application and look at the output. Notice that we have first name and last name within the accordion. Let's stop the application and switch back to the code and make these text boxes better, and we'll add more items under the accordion. Let's add a leading label for the input layout for the visual aesthetics. Just before the entry, add input layout sf text input layout dot leading view. Please recollect the leading view session that we have spoke about in the 4th session. Let me add a leading label over here. It's called label font family equal to input layout icons. Font size, let me keep the font size as 18, and then let me put the height request equal to 24, text equal to F, and text color equal to gray. And then we will say vertical text alignment equal to N. Let me close this leading view label here. Then let me also add few more properties to the SF input layout. It says container background equal to transparent. And let me also add container type equal to outlined. Let me remove this width request. Let me add this container background transparent and container type outline for the other component as well. Let me remove this width request over here. Let me add a dummy leading view label in front of the last name. So let me copy and paste the leading view label here, and let me just name it as label and leave it like that so that it creates an empty layout. Let me switch back. Notice that we now have the leading view over here, and let me change the position of the leading view to outside. We can do it with a simple property over here, and let's say after the helper text leading view position we have inside and outside. Let me keep it outside and save it. Notice that this is outside, and then we'll do the same thing for the second layout control. Paste it over here, switch back, and notice that they are in line. Now when I click on this, you have a prompt and first name is shown as a floating label over here, even the last name as well. So the floating labels are default properties for input text controls. Let's switch back and add more items such as phone and address. Let me collapse this accordion item, copy the entire accordion item and create one more accordion item beneath, and change this as phone, and then let me name this as enter your mobile hint as mobile, and then enter your work phone, work number, hint as work. Let me save this one. Switch back. Notice the output. We now have mobile and work. However, let's change the leading label to E over here so that it shows a view of phone. Now that's it. And then we need to add the masked entry over here. How do we do that? Let me remove this entry and replace this with masked entry. Let me stop this application and switch to Syncfusion Toolbox, and let me pick the masked view entry here. Drag and drop the masked entry after the entry, and I will remove the entry from here. We now have the masked entry. Now let me change the mask as a phone number. It is looking as a date right now. Let me change the font size, remove the height request and width request, and change the font size to 18. Now that's it. Now let me switch back. Let me restart the application again. Let me expand the phone. Notice that we have the masked entry over here. So I can type in 10-digit number. Let me copy this masked entry from the mobile to the work. So let me replace this entry with the masked entry. Notice the output. Notice that we have the masked entry for the phone and name. Now let me add the address accordion item. To save some time, I have added the address accordion item from my other window. Now notice that at a given point of time, only one accordion item is getting expanded. So let's change that from expand mode single to multiple. Now we can expand the multiple items. Let me put some height over here. Let's say height request as 500 so that we can get the scrolling. Notice that we now have the scroll bar, and I can expand and collapse any of the accordion item. Now let's say we want to add some color or customizations to the accordion header. We can do it by using the content page resources. So let me start doing that. So under content page, let me add content page dot resources. Under the resources, we can add a style which targets the accordion item. So let's add style target type is accordion item with a property of visual state groups. Let me close this style and setter properties. Let me start adding the visual state group list items under the setter group. Now we'll have the visual state group list And then let me close the Visual State Group list. Under Visual State Group list, let me add Visual State Group. Now within the Visual State Group, I would say Visual State name, let's call it as expanded collapse, and then we will say Visual State dot setters, and we'll add the setter properties for header background and header icon. So I'll add the value as white and the header background as some color which I have chosen. Similarly, we will add a visual state for the collapsed as well. I'm copying it from the other window to save some time. So I've set the collapsed and expanded header background as this color and header icon color as white. Now once we have done that, we need to set the text color for the accordion items. So within the accordion item, let me name this as xname equal to item 1. So for item 1, under the label, I would say text color equal to, we will binding of header icon color, and source we will say x reference of item 1. So for item 1, this is item 1 and we have 3 accordion items. For each of these items, we will add the text color for the header. Now let's switch back and look at the code. Let me restart the application. I have changed the collapsed background color and header icon color to black and light yellow. Notice that the collapsed colors are showing as light yellow and the expanded header background is showing as 675.0A4. Now let's add some skills to this employee information. In order to add the skills, we can use the drop downs or free text boxes. Chips are the new controls available in Syncfusion, and we can leverage on the chips controls to create the skills for an employee. Chips can also be used for filtering out the items in the e-commerce portal. At this point of time for our use case, I will use chips to create and select the skills of the employees. Let me switch back to the application and show you how we can achieve that. Let me switch to the employee info and create a class called employee skills. Let me switch to the employee layout model and create an observable collection called employee skills over here. Now under generate source, let's create an observable collection object and add an employee skill called .NET MVC. Now if we need to add more skills, we will do that runtime. Right now we have created the employee skills and returning the observable collection of the employee skills, as we need to bind the employee skills to the chip group control. Now let me switch back to the XAML file and add a binding context over here on the top. So let's say content page dot binding context, and let's add the binding context as view model. So let me declare that over here and let me refer to the binding context within the content page binding context. Now let me switch to the Syncfusion's control box. I have created a empty accordion item here and created a vertical stack layout. So let me expand that and create SF chip group. Let me drag and drop the SF chip group here. Observe that by default it is creating the SF chip group items with small, medium and large. So let's create our own custom items and bind it to the view model. I will remove this items and then I would say chip type as input, so that we give an option to the user to input the skills. We will say display member path equal to name, and then we'll bind the item source which we have just created. Item source equal to, let's create a binding and we'll bind the employee skills that we have created. Along with this, we need to provide an option to enter the skills by the end user. So in order to support that, we would say input layout SF chip group dot input view. Within the input view, we will define the entry. That entry would be, let's define a name equal to entry, and then we'll give the font size as 15 with height request and width request. Let me create that and close the entry. Let me start the application and notice the output. Notice that the mentioned skill is binded to the chip group and we have an option to enter more skills over here. However, we need to bind the event once we enter the skill into this chip entry control. So let me switch back to the code and create an event under the entry called completed, and let me create a new event handler for completed. Let me stop the application. Let me switch back to the C# file under the employee view. Notice that we have the event created. Now let's enhance this so that we can bind the employee skills with the new skill entered into the text box. So let me create a view model, which is nothing but the binding context view model, and then from the center I will take the input text. So we have the name from the center as the input view dot text, and then from the view model of the binding model I will add the new employee skills from the entered name. Now let me add the namespace reference using syncfusion.source.model. Now I will add the name over here, and then once we add the name, we need to make the entry text as empty. So let me switch back, and we have the name as entry here, and so I'm making the name as empty once we add the skill. Now let me restart the application. Let me enter a skill called SQL Server and press enter. Notice that the skill has been added to the chip group. It is that simple. So an employee can choose his skills, make an entry in the entry template, and it gets added to the chip group. We can add many customizations to the chip group, such as chip background, chip text color, close button color, and many more. I will encourage you guys to explore those options. Let's now move to the segmented control. Let's stop this application and create another accordion item under the item number 4. Let me copy and paste that, and let me rename as item 5, and let me call this as, instead of text skill, I will call this as communication preferences. Let me change the reference to 5. Let me delete the SF chip group from here, and let me drag and drop and add the segment control. So let me switch to the Syncfusion box and search for the segment control. There you go. Under the vertical stack layout, let me drag and drop the SF segmented control. Notice that it creates the item source as default array list with day, week, work week, and month. Instead, we will change that to add the item source as phone, email, SMS, WhatsApp as mode of communication. And above that, let me add some settings. Let me call this as under the segmented control. Let me add segment indicator select settings. Let me close the selection indicator settings and add buttons dot selection indicator settings and add a background as green. Let me change it to button. Let me change the background to green and close this one. Let's restart the application now. Notice that we now have the segment over here. On selection, we have the background as green. We can add an indicator placement as well. So let me change the selection indicator placement to the bottom. We can use bottom border, top border, fill, and border. So I would say bottom border, so that we get a selected indicator at the border bottom. That's it. Let's give a stroke as Dodger blue. So I will add stroke as Dodger blue. Notice that we have the selected indicator as Dodger blue here. Let's now explore the checkbox control to capture the hobbies of the employee. So let me copy this accordion item and place it under the item 5 and rename it to 6 and change the label text as hobbies. Let me bind the item 6 over here, and then let me delete the segmented control that we have created, and then let me drag and drop the SF checkbox under the vertical stack layout. Let's drag and drop the SF checkbox control, and you have the SF checkbox, and let's add some buttons within the SF checkbox. So we'll call this as, instead of SF checkbox, I would say option 1, and instead of the text SF checkbox, let's add it as cricket. And we'll give is3 state equal to true. Let's copy and paste this and create option 2 called football. SF checkboxes are pretty simple. You can add your own customization to these checkboxes. I recommend you to explore all of those customizations by yourself. Now let's run the application and look at the output. Notice that we now have hobbies as the accordion item with the 2 checkbox options, and you can choose these checkboxes with 3 different states, which is selected, unselected, and intermediate. Now let's switch back and explore the save button option. Let's now stop the application and switch back to the XAML file. Let me add the Syncfusion button control here, just above the vertical stack layout. Let me add few padding, add the text as save. Let me add a width request of 200. Let me remove the click, which is added by default. Let's add a height request. Let's run the application. Notice that we now have the save button available. I just added the image source as save icon. Let's look at the output. The image is not visible. So let me add another property called show icon equal to true, and the image should appear here. Now we have the save icon image. We can change the height of the image with the image size property, and let me make the image size property to 30. Notice that the image size has increased. We can add many other customizations as well, such as I can give a background as white. Right now we have a text color. Let me put the background color as white. Notice that we have the background color white now and the text color as black, so that it appears back, and we can position the images either towards the left or towards the right, either the start or the end of the button. So let me add image alignment to start, which is by default set to start. Let me change that to end. Notice that the image has been shifted to the end. Feel free to add your own customizations to the buttons. You can add corner radius and other custom properties available with the SF button. Let's say we have a use case where we need to show the loading gear on click of this save button. Whenever we click on the save button, while the save action is performed in the background, we want to show a loading gear button till the action is completed. You can achieve that functionality by applying a data template to the Syncfusion button control. Let me show you how to do that. Scroll to the top of this page, and under the resource dictionary, let me wrap it up under resource dictionary, the style that we have created earlier, so that I can add more customizations to the resources. One of which is a data template. In the data template customization, I would say XMX key is loading template, and let me add some custom properties to that, which is, let me add a horizontal stack layout, and let me add an input busy indicator. You can pick up the SF busy indicator from the Syncfusion control box. Once you drag and drop that, let's add another label called saving data. That means when we click that button, we are going to show a label called saving data, and then let me close this horizontal stack layout over here. That's it. We have defined the template. On click of the save button, we need to attach the loading template dynamically in the code behind file. Let me switch to the solution, switch back to the coding view, and let's create an event to the save button. So let's say clicked new event handler. Let me switch back to the code behind, and in the code behind, we're going to say that this dot resources dot first dot default. Let me pick the first default template and call it as loading template equal to, and then I would say this dot SF button dot content. So we are replacing the content here with this data template equal to loading template dot value. Obviously the first of default will return you the key and value pair. So I'm choosing the value from the loading template. Let me convert this into, cast this into a data template. Cast this into data template. That's it. Now let's run this application and notice the output. Let me click on the save button now. Notice that on click of the Syncfusion button, the dynamic data template is applied from the code behind event handler. With this, we have successfully completed the text input layout and button controls. In the next session, we will focus on rest of the controls. Till then, thank you for listening. Have a great day.